This is Reese Brady, dictating field report number 24, the Pilgrim File. I have secured a kayak and a set of scuba gear.
Hey Vince, this is your brother. How is the world's greatest photojournalist doing? Speaking of your photos, ever since you sent me that Polaroid from the Lake Pinier accident, I've been hoping to find something that could somehow top that. I've been hiking this trail all year long, and now I think, finally, I've managed to do so. Vince, I'm sending you this letter, and at the same time, I'm also sending you a postcard from picturesque Moses, Tennessee. If these actually get to you, be sure to hang on to them. As you're reading this, Moses is underwater. The waters should only be waist deep by the time you eventually get this letter. But, technically, the whole town is officially part of a federal waterway now and no longer a municipality. By the end of this month, the dam will have completely submerged the whole thing. You won't even be able to see the church steeples of Moses anymore. I came across Moses totally by chance. About a day after I crossed into the state, my pack was getting heavy and I needed a break from the relentless scenic beauty of the Appalachian Trail. I was dying to go sit in an air-conditioned theater and watch a movie. As these thoughts were brewing in my head, I ran into two girls who were standing at an intersection with another trail. Lydia and Vicky introduced themselves and said they were day hikers who had taken the Dodge Trail up from a town called Moses. The trail they were on wasn't on the cheap map I picked up when I started, but it was blazed and it looked recently traveled. They told me that if I wanted, I could turn off the AT and follow the Dodge Trail down to the river, then walk in between the riverbank and the railroad tracks until I hit town. I asked about the amenities, and they told me about a quaint little movie theater and a couple of town diners. Lydia and Vicky were headed in the other direction, so I was solo again after that. I followed their directions and stayed on the trail as it descended down to the river. By about an hour before sundown, the trail had faded out, but I had arrived at a spot between the river and what I at least thought were the railroad tracks. The tracks were there, but broken up into sections. They were mostly covered by mud and silt. When I saw the town, I only recognized it as such because in the last of the daylight, I could make out the silhouettes of roof lines and chimneys. I didn't approach because the lack of light or activity spooked me a little, and I wasn't even sure I'd run into the right town. So instead, I made camp on a sandy spot at the river's edge and spent a long, hungry night waiting for the sun to come up again. When the sunrise finally came, I broke camp and walked into the town. I stood at the first curb I came to and took in the place. The town was built on a slope that sagged down in the direction of the river. There was garbage piled up against the walls of buildings wherever the street took a sharp angle. A lot of the windows and doors that I could see were boarded up on the ground floor. Some of the buildings listed at slight angles, as if the timbers holding them up had begun to rot behind their walls. I saw a vine growing out of a window and a small tree sprouting from a chimney. Some of the lots were vacant except for piles of rubble. There were no people at all that I could see. At first, I thought Lydia and Vicky had played a trick on me when they realized I was hiking by myself. I began to imagine them chuckling about sending a stranger into a complete ghost town expecting breakfast. Then, to my relief, I saw an old rambler appear around a corner onto the main street a few blocks up. It rolled down the street, then past me, heading in the direction of the river, and pulled into the parking lot of a post office a couple of blocks below where I was standing. Since the post office seemed to be the only thing open in that strange place, I walked over and went inside. It was dark in there, and the air conditioning had not been turned on. The driver of the Rambler was milling around next to the P.O. boxes. There were no clerks on duty, and no one else in the post office. The lights behind the counter were off, and it was completely dark in the back. I asked the driver of the Rambler, a respectable-looking elderly woman, if there were any diners within walking distance. She told me there was only one place in town that might still be open. I began to understand the situation when she said, "You'd better hurry up, though. The Corps of Engineers is flooding the place at midnight tonight." Turns out they had just built a dam downstream, and I had come to Moses, Tennessee, the day before it was about to become operational. The town and the whole valley surrounding it is getting turned into a new reservoir. The diner was a few blocks up and over from the post office. The buildings I saw on the way were just like all the others I had seen. Everyone seemed to have left Moses already. Everything looked like the town had been abandoned for quite a while before I got there. The diner was hot when I walked in, and the air was almost sticky with cooking grease. They hadn't bothered turning on the air conditioning in there either. I was the only customer, but the owner was there, working the grill alone. He invited me to sit down, and without waiting to take my order, scraped a pile of bacon and eggs onto a plate in front of me. I asked him how much, and he said, "No point, the flood's coming." I asked him if that was why he was closing down, because of the impending flood. Then I waited for him to tell me that that was a dumb question. He said something like, "It seems this place is always flooded." I remembered the partially occluded train tracks and asked him if the river flooded pretty regularly. "Regularly enough," he said. "We lose some buildings, we lose some people, then we build more of the town a little further up the slope each time. The last flood took the Edgears sisters. They got trapped in their car. The fire department recovered the car eventually, but the river never gave back the sisters." "Wait," I asked, "they never found them?" He shook his head. Maybe not," he said. "Moses, Tennessee, is the perfect time to make things disappear." I think he was just old and getting his words mixed up, but that's what he said. I was still struggling to believe Lydia and Vicky had concocted a whole story about this thriving town, so part of me thought there might still be a chance to take in a show in Moses. I asked the old man if there was still a movie theater in town. He kind of chuckled and said sure, there was, and it was still playing Billy Jack if I was interested. When he told me that, I thought to myself, that can't be the same Billy Jack, not the one we saw as kids. Hey, Vince, do you remember that movie? It was that kooky kung fu western with Tom Laughlin. Anyway, the owner of the diner told me to go check out my movie and then come back. "I'll cook up those burgers for you, and maybe you'll take them with you when you go to leave." I actually hadn't ordered any burgers, but he seemed like a nice old man, and I never say no to free food. I did find the movie theater. There I was, in the middle of the road because there were no cars going down it, just trash blowing around behind me. And I was looking up at the tall letters there on that old marquee. They indeed announced the words Billy Jack to the empty street. Do you remember how much time we spent reenacting that one scene with our friends on the playground when we were in middle school? It was clear that the theater had been closed for a long, long time, but this was the only place I could have been told about. The two girls had seemed so certain and sincere when they spoke to me back on the trail. I even knocked on the doors of the movie theater, checking to see if there might still be someone in there. The glass on those doors was coated with years of dust. There was nobody inside. Back at the diner, the owner had a bag of burgers waiting for me. I asked if there was maybe another town called Moses that perhaps the two girls had been telling me about. "No," he said, "this is the only Moses, Tennessee." He handed me a greasy sack of 4 or 5 burgers. I noticed that he had set one aside on a plate next to the oven. I asked who that was for. He told me there was a truck driver who came into the diner every week this day at the exact same time and had done so for years. He's responsible for running that truck up here from Spartanburg every Tuesday, the owner told me. He just brings the truck into town, parks it, then walks down here. After lunch, he goes back to the truck. He can always tell the truck sits higher on its axles, so whatever cargo was on board, it's all been taken out. He has no idea who unloads it, what gets unloaded, or why. After thanking him for my provisions, I left the diner. I decided to take one more walk through this doomed place before it disappeared. I walked right up the middle of the road for the entire length of the main street. There is not much to report, just more empty parking lots and boarded-up buildings. But there was a small square building at the end of the main street. It looked like a windowless skip, like a utility shed a local phone company might build to house some of its switches. This one had a single door in the front. There was a delivery truck parked right outside. I figured maybe this was the truck that the owner of the diner had told me about. I wondered what the truck driver might think of this being the last day of the town's existence. So I walked up to the cab of the truck and called in. There was no reply. The truck seemed to have nobody in it. That was when I noticed that the front door of the skip was hanging open. I called a hello through the doorway and didn't get an answer there either. So I stepped in and set my pack and the sack of burgers down just inside the door. There was a single overhead light bulb in the ceiling. It was on, but it was barely illuminating the place. There was nothing inside, no furniture, no phone equipment, nothing. Or so it seemed at first. I took 2 more steps in and almost fell head first through a hole in the floor. I stepped back, fished out my flashlight, and got a better look. There were 2 large openings in the concrete floor, one near the doorway and the other by the far wall. I stood over them and shone my flashlight down each one. Both had a set of concrete steps that disappeared into the darkness far below and out of range of my flashlight. I think maybe they must have been twin entrances to a mine or something like that underneath the town. I didn't feel like exploring further. After stepping back out into the daylight, I noticed the back of the delivery truck had been left open. I called out one more time, asking if there was anyone there. Since there was still no response, I approached the truck to investigate. I was curious what it was that someone could possibly be delivering to the middle of nowhere like this. So I shone the flashlight into the truck. Vince, believe me when I tell you, the inside of that truck was stacked floor to ceiling with coffins. There were several different vintages of coffin inside that truck. Some of them looked decrepit and ancient, like they'd been dug up from an old graveyard out west. Others were more modern, like they were from a funeral home. Some were basically just elongated aluminum tubs with a lid on them. But they were all coffins. As I was standing there, the ground started to shake. I know that when they build dams and start flooding places with water, you get what are called subduction quakes. But the rumbling did not stop. The ground beneath my feet began to shake harder and harder. The truck in front of me was swaying on its axles. I heard something fall over and crash in one of the abandoned buildings on the street nearby. That got me running. I grabbed my pack from inside the doorway of the little skip and fled down the street. I had decided the best thing to do was to run back to the diner where I knew there was at least one other person. As I ran, the quaking subsided. I was huffing and puffing when I made it back to the diner. The old owner was still there. He had not left his station behind the counter. He gave me a perplexed look, and I could tell I was not making any sense to him. I was jabbering about an earthquake and coffins. He told me to sit down and calm down. He poured me a cup of coffee and told me that, no, in fact, there had not been an earthquake here since the flood that washed half of Moses away, back in the summer of 71. There was one other person in the place. It was a guy in coveralls, seated at the counter, eating the last hamburger. I asked him if he was the driver of the delivery truck. He asked me what business that was of mine. I asked him what had he been delivering over at the end of Main Street, and just what was that little building supposed to be for. "Dunno," is the only response the driver gave. But then he set the burger back down on his plate and turned to look at me. "You didn't look inside the truck?" the driver asked. "Did you?" Then the owner interrupted us. "I remember. Back when the town flooded, I was trapped on my roof for 3 days. I ran out of fresh water by the end of the first day, and I didn't have any food at all. While I was up there, in the summer heat and sun, all day long, I thought I saw something strange. The floodwaters seemed to recede all of a sudden, but not just recede. It was as if the flood was undoing itself, like a film that gets played in reverse. Then the water flowed back in even more violently than it had the first time. I was certain the whole house would be swept away with it. As I was clinging to the chimney, I saw a man struggle by, waist deep in the flood. He was wearing a backpack. The man stumbled on something under the water and fell to all fours. He struggled free from the churn back to his feet and tried to keep going. It looked like he was gasping or yelling, but I couldn't hear anything, not even the sound of the water. Then the water started kicking up all around him, like it was caught up in an invisible hailstorm. I saw the man with the backpack go back down beneath the water, and the waters didn't let him go after that. So, Moses, Tennessee is a very peculiar place. I would have liked to ask the old man more about his dream or about the skip, but there wasn't enough time. This place is about to get flooded. Right now, I'm back at the post office, trying to finish the letter before the last pickup that's supposed to happen in a couple of minutes, at least according to the schedule on the blue box outside. I hope someone comes to get it. It would be a shame if you missed out on this great postcard. Your brother, Harold Sloan.
This is it. 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 This is it.